Hey, everybody. This is Tim Laskus, and this is the Tim Laskus Show, episode 15. And today's featured guest is Jamie Newman. He is a super cool guy who lives in Canada, and his background is in management. He offers all sorts of programs for managers. He has a manager readiness program, a first-time manager program. He provides coaching one-on-one, and he even has his own podcast called Your Best Manager Podcast. And another thing I learned about him, he's an awesome drum player. He's been playing like for 20 years. And so be sure to listen. Enjoy.
The Tim Laskus Show, in search of entrepreneurial gold. Tim digs deep into the minds of his guests, entertaining, down to earth, and informative. Now, here's your host, Tim Laskus.
Welcome, everyone, to the Tim Laskus Show. I'm very pleased to have Jamie Newman as my guest today. Jamie, thanks for joining me.
Hey, I'm happy to be here, Tim.
Hey, I know you were telling me earlier you're from Canada and you played the drums with Coldplay. Is that true?
That would be an honor. I absolutely love Coldplay, and it's one of my I don't want to say bucket list item. Yeah, it's a bucket list item to go see them. But no, I have not played drums with them, but I have been playing the drums since I was 10 years old. Music's always been a passion of mine. Has nothing to do with the business that I run right now. But let me tell you, it's a pretty good stress reliever to just smack away on some drums. But yeah, and I'm Canadian. Grew up outside of Toronto. I now live in Calgary, Alberta. Been married for I better not screw this up. It'll be 9 years in July.
Yeah, you better get that right, man.
And I've got two boys under the age of 4 that keep me extremely, extremely busy.
Wow. Well, I have one that's 3, and so if you have 2, man, I give you credit. I don't know how you do it. For me, it's all about drinking Red Bull. That's all I can do to keep up with them.
I've avoided Red Bull. I don't think I've had one in the last couple years.
Don't get started. That monster
Coffee,
too.
though.
Yeah, coffee. Coffee's the best way. Coffee from Costa Rica. That's what you need. Cafe Brit.
Really?
I'll throw that out there. Oh, it's the best. It's
someone
the best. My wife's
actually-
from California. I mean, Costa Rica, and so that's just the best. So.
Nice. Oh, someone got me do you know what a mocha pot is?
Mocha pot? No. Mm-mm.
So it's like, I'm going to assume it's European because I saw it on a European TV show once, but that's a horrible thing to say. But you put, so it's basically this pot and you put water in the bottom of the pot, and then there's a little spot that you put espresso coffee grinds in. And then and then it's got a little container on top. So when the water boils, it's like the steam goes through the coffee and then comes out, and it makes espresso. It's pretty good. And
wow, so is it pretty
has
potent,
been caffeinating me very well. It is very strong. Yeah, you have to add water to it. Well, I do. I'm sure you could just take it like a shot, but
like thin it down a little bit, like some like hard moonshine. You got to thin it down a little bit to get it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, is this, with being up in Canada and being cold, I mean, I guess people I don't know, what do people do to stay warm up there?
Yeah, coffee's good. And we got a fireplace. We didn't have a fireplace in our last home, but we've got a fireplace in our home now if we need to, but it's not that bad. I mean, we're pretty moderate when it comes to cold weather. I mean, you go 3-4 hours, 5 hours north of where we are. I don't know. I wouldn't do it, but
Yeah.
There's only a couple days a year where I walk outside and I feel like my eyeballs are going to freeze.
Oh man. Hey, let me ask you real quick, and I'm always curious when people from Canada, do you say garage or garage?
Garage.
Garage. Okay. Where do they say garage? I saw it on one of those shows, like those home shows, and there's like, oh, the house is 4 bedrooms, 3 baths with a 2-car garage. I'm like, what?
I don't know where that is. There are different, like, depending on where you go in Canada, there's different accents. There's not as much variety as there is in the U.S. Because I went to school in Virginia, and I was amazed at how many different accents there were, but it's very similar in Canada. You put a Canadian from the West Coast and East Coast in a room, they won't be able to talk.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, it's the kind of same here. Well, I went to school up in New Jersey. I was born and raised in the South, in South Carolina. And so I had much more of a Southern accent talking like this when I went up there. And the girls loved it, but the guys were like, dude, where are you from? Like the stick somewhere? You've been living in a cabin with a dirt floor? Who are you? So, dude, I got rid of the accent real quick. And one day I did something and I said, I think I kicked a chair. I had my shoes off and I said, oh, shit. And they're like, what? What did you say? And I'm like, shit. And they're like, no, it's shit. Shit, you got to say it real quick. And that was the first word I learned to say, Jamie, without a Southern accent. Just a little story there.
Good for you.
This is a crazy conversation. You guys, where are you guys going? So we'll shift the focus and get back on topic. But can you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself professionally and what you're working on?
Yeah, so I spent a bulk of my career in the recruiting consulting industry. So essentially what I did is I helped managers and I helped companies hire people, manage employee performance, and then obviously retain the good people that they hired. And then after doing that for 8 years, I moved into what I do now, which is leadership development, manager training. I do that through yourbestmanager.com. And essentially, I provide training resources, one-on-one coaching to managers, and primarily that's first-time managers. And then I also host a leadership podcast called the Your Best Manager Podcast, where I interview leadership experts and essentially ask them this crazy question, who is your best manager and why? And it's actually surprising. I thought that I'd get a lot of people saying, oh, let me tell you about my worst manager, but it's been really cool. So essentially I'm in the leadership development space and I teach people, and then I feel like I get taught by interviewing leadership experts, and so that's a lot of fun. And right now what I do is, or what I'm working on is a whole bunch of just free stuff. I've got a free management course that's already online, and I do webinars and short challenges. And so I just everything that I do is how much stuff can I give away for free to help people be better managers without becoming homeless.
Wow, well that's cool. I checked out your website, man. That thing rocks. It is awesome.
Well, thank you.
It looks like you spent $1 million on that thing. I don't know if you did or not.
No, I spent 1 million hours though, and my
okay. Well, it shows $1 million, 1 million hours. You know, you get the same result, I guess. Huh?
It is. I should have paid somebody. When I think about the number of hours I put in, it was probably not worth it.
Well, that's your pride and joy. You can put your blood, sweat, and tears in that thing. It shows. It's awesome, man. I loved it. And I saw that it was really big. It said, you know, who was your best manager? And like you'd mentioned earlier, I went right to, well, I don't know, but I can certainly tell you about 2 or 3 stories of my worst managers, because they were crap.
Yeah, so the way I always ask the question, because one of the first people I invited on the show was like, well, I actually find I learned more from people that weren't great managers. So the way I ask it is, who was your best manager? But maybe it wasn't a manager, so it could be a mentor. And so it allows people to not have to talk negatively, because we've all had people that come in our lives that inspire us, encourage us, challenge us. And so I ask it a little bit more flexible, so that I can get some really positive, inspiring stories. So, but it's been great.
Well, could you share with the listeners maybe 3 qualities that, I mean, I'm sure there's many qualities of a great manager out there, but, you know, out of interviewing, you know, lots of people and, you know, working in this industry, what would you say are maybe 3 standout qualities of great managers?
All right. So, first and foremost, and I hope this one surprises you, but it might not. The best managers just know how to ask good questions. So if you can ask a good question, I don't care about whatever else you know about leadership. You'll figure it out by asking a good question. Because when you look at leadership, and I guess I'm kind of in a roundabout way answering your question, you've got to be a good listener. You've got to know what's important to your employees. You've got to be able to deliver business results. You've got to be able to motivate. You've got to be able to challenge people. You've got to be able to fix poor performance, identify poor performance. There's a lot of things that go into that. Yeah, and the ones that can ask good questions to get the information necessary to make those decisions are the best managers, hands down. And a really quick example of this, someone comes into work in the morning and you say, hey, how are you doing? Or most managers will say that, oh, good. And that's where it ends. Great managers will be like, oh, what was good? and they'll keep that conversation going until they can find out something about that person personally, about how they can lead them. And so great managers ask intentional, very good questions. And then the next thing would be, I'd say, goal setting. So the best managers know how to, like, not only set and accomplish goals themselves, but they know how to teach their employees how to set goals, and then how to find a correlation between what they do personally and what they do professionally. If you can bridge that gap and people come to work because it means something to them significant in their personal life, you've nailed it. And I guess a third would just be a servant mentality, which is, it's really, I don't want to say cliche in the leadership sphere, but if you can walk in recognizing that you're there to help other people succeed, the rest kind of takes care of itself. So I'd say those are 3 qualities: ask good questions, teach your team to set goals, and have a servant mindset.
That's excellent. And I mean, I couldn't agree more, because, as you're talking about these qualities, I'm thinking of the worst managers I've had in jobs in the past, and none of them asked questions. All of them told them, said, "Get over there and do that because I said so." And it was frowned upon to ask a question, and they were always telling us, they never wanted to our opinion about anything, and I don't think it was so much teaching either. It was just do it, figure it out. And you're kind of scratching your head. Well, how do I do it? And they're like, well, just don't screw it up. Just do it. And I'm like, well, dude, if you would give me a little direction here.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, because a lot of the reason people do that, they tell people what to do instead of asking questions. It's really funny, because what they're doing is it's a form of a defense mechanism. I don't want to ask a question because I don't want to know what's wrong, because I'm afraid if I don't have the right answer, or if I don't know what to do, you're going to judge me as a bad manager. But I'm your manager, so you also expect me to know what to do. And so I'm not going to ask for help. I'm just going to tell you what to do. So it actually is a reflection of a lot of insecurity. But I mean, the thing is, you don't have to. You talked about sharing opinion. You don't have to let your employees make decisions to allow them to feel like they're giving input. Like, you can ask an employee, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And they can tell you, "I hate it." It doesn't mean that you're going to do what they say, but you've just given them a voice, and all you say is, "All right, I'm going to take that into consideration. Thanks." That's so powerful, but too many managers are like, "Well, what if they say they don't like what I'm doing, or what if..." Who cares? People want to feel like they have a voice and that they're contributing to something important. And if a manager can just ask them what they think, "Hey, what's working right now? Hey, what do you think we could do better at? Hey, what did you think about this?" It's so powerful.
Yeah. And people often, they feel like a peon. They feel like just a nobody when they're never asked their opinion about anything. And that is a powerful thing. And also just to give people some type of positive reinforcement every now and then, instead of just waiting to jump on them when things go wrong. And it's like, that really pisses people off. They don't ask them their opinion ever, and all they ever say is when they screw up, or when there's a potential, it looks like they screwed up, maybe they didn't, but they get blamed for it.
Yeah. And even that goes back to, maybe it's a stretch, but I could still bring that back to asking good questions, because I hope there shouldn't be a manager out there who intentionally wants their employees to be upset. Like, as a manager, your job is to deliver business results, and the way you do that is by helping your employees deliver business results, right? So, if you were intentionally wanting to demean and make people feel bad and reduce their productivity, you're hurting yourself, right? So no manager actually wants to do that. So if you just asked a question, "Hey, how do you feel right now? What did you think? How did what I just communicate land with you?" All of a sudden, you're going to get some feedback. "Oh, I didn't appreciate what you said." I guarantee those managers that we consider like monsters are cracking a whip, if they knew how what they said really impacted their employees, they'd probably change a couple things, but they never ask for that feedback. Yeah. And so their employees are terrified to give them that feedback because they're going to be defensive. But if you ask and solicit and say, "Hey, how am I doing?" I mean, you're going to get some honest feedback, and you're going to improve because of it. And the only way you can even ask that question is if you're going to be humble, right? So
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
I'm rambling.
No, you're so true. And I think it's probably more difficult for managers who have a fragile ego and who, if they hear any kind of the slightest criticism, they really take it to heart and it doesn't sit well. So they don't ever want to put themselves in that position of asking a question because,
Yeah.
what are they going to do with this information they get and how is it going to impact them? But yeah, that's, and in smaller companies, do you often see that it's people get promoted to management positions because they were good at their job, not necessarily because they're good with people. And that seems to be a big issue with some of these smaller companies. Now, larger corporations, they'll go out and hire professionals who come in and have been doing that for a while. But a lot of smaller companies will just hire within. It's like, oh, well, Bill's been with the company for 15 years on the line.
Yeah.
Let's bring him on up. He's good at his job. Well, hey, he's good at his job. That doesn't mean he's going to be a good manager.
Yeah, and that feeds that ego that you were talking about, because the person who's always been a top performer, like I was talking to, I'm going to throw a shout out to another Canadian leadership expert. The guy's name's Tanvir Nassir, and he said something incredibly eye-opening for me. I'd never heard it. He's like, everybody thinks of leadership growth, leadership development as climbing another rung on the ladder that you're already on. But when you move into management and into leadership, you're switching ladders. And people have a very difficult time recognizing that because they've been the best. And literally the second that they get promoted to a manager, they're no longer the best because they haven't done it before. However, if they're a top performer, they've got this ego like they're supposed to be the best. Well, that's why I got in the role. And you need that from a confidence standpoint. But sometimes that translates into bad management because you don't want to ask for help. You don't want people to see your weakness. You don't want people to find out that maybe you don't know everything. But even worse than that, and this hits small companies especially, companies don't recognize how much of a challenge it is for a first-time manager, and they don't understand the value of, I'm using a huge sweeping generalization, but they don't understand the value of investing in actually training leadership. And there's an article, I always go back to it, from Harvard Business Review, and it talks about how we wait too long to train our leaders. And the average age of a first-time manager is, I want to say it's like between 30 and 33. But the average age when people get leadership development, when the companies are providing leadership training, like obviously a manager is going to be trained how to run a report, how to do a performance review, how to do the tasks. But how to inspire, how to motivate, how to challenge, how to give and receive feedback, they don't get that training until they're in their 40s. So you've got, on average, most managers, if you were to just blanket all industries and all companies the same, most managers get promoted and no one teaches them how to lead people until they've been managing people for 10 years. That's crazy.
Yeah, 10 years of messing up, huh?
Yeah, I mean, that hit me. The first three people I had on my team left the organization within 9 months.
Wow.
And I thought it was them. I mean, I had one quit after a performance conversation, and the other one I had to terminate. But when I go back, all three were my fault. I know it.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it sounds like lesson learned. Well,
absolutely.
Well, speaking of lessons, as an entrepreneur yourself and being in business, for the listeners who are entrepreneurs or maybe they're on the fence, what are some tips that you would give them that you've kind of learned along the way, and maybe an actual resource or a book or something that could be helpful?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of power in setting deadlines for better or worse. I've got a whiteboard behind me, and I use it like crazy, and anyone who's worked with me knows I probably use a whiteboard way too much. But when I say I'm going to do something, I literally set a date, and I'm not afraid to put it out there, and I'll map out everything it takes to get me from point A to point B. And I don't know, excuse me, I don't know who told me that was a good idea, but I've heard it enough places to know that it is, that I'll just say, hey, I'm going to do something, and I'll put it out there, and all of a sudden there's an accountability and an ownership. And I did that in two circumstances, and one was when I actually quit my job to become an entrepreneur. I gave myself a 6-month window. I'd worked for my company at the time for about 7.5 years. And so for me, giving it an extra 6 months wasn't that big of a deal. But I was like, if I feel the same way as I feel right now, 6 months from today, I'm going to quit. And so I literally set a deadline, and I told people about that. And it was all based around, I had a house that we bought, so I knew I couldn't quit in those months. I was like, if I feel the same way, I'm going to quit. And when the time came, I'd put it out there. I'd made a commitment. I felt the same way. So I quit. It wasn't easy, but because I had told so many people and put it out there, I felt like I had an ownership to honor what was important to me, and I didn't have the opportunity to have an excuse. And the other situation was actually really recently. I hosted a webinar teaching people why good people quit and then how to retain them. And because I did this all online, I set a date before I'd even done a single thing. I was like, I can get this ready in 3 weeks. And it was 3:30 a.m. the morning of my first webinar, and my wife had stayed up late with me, and we're like putting images on the presentation because I had all the content, but I didn't have it 100% ready. And if I did not set that date, I would have procrastinated like crazy. But since I set the date, I was going to do whatever it took to hit it. And because I actually put it out there, I had people registered and made that commitment. I had to get it done in the 3 weeks, and I figured it out. So that'd be the first tip: set a deadline, stick with it. The second would be, this is like, I don't know if you've heard of this before. It's an app I think it's for Android and iPhone, but it's called Word Swag. Have you heard of that?
No, I haven't. Word
It's
Swag.
brilliant.
I'll have to check
It's
it out.
$5. It's the best $5 I think I've spent on my business, because it basically, it was described to me this way. It's like having a graphic designer in your pocket. So if you've got quote graphics or blog post graphics or Instagram, anything that combines a picture and words, this gives you like 200 plus options for how to put your words on, and literally in minutes you can have a really nice looking image.
Cool.
And once I got it, I realized everybody uses it.
I'll have to
So yeah, Word Swag, it's awesome.
Word Swag. Got it. Well, that's an excellent resource, and I'm going to check that out myself, because the stuff I put out there is pretty amateur. So I need something to help me look a little more professional, like yourself.
Well, now you know the secret.
Yeah, that is cool. You mentioned setting the date, and I think that is so powerful. Is set that deadline and tell people what that deadline is. Tell people what you're doing. A lot of people won't share that information because they think, well, if I don't do it, then they'll think I'm an idiot or whatnot. But no, that's what you need to do. You tell people, and then they'll think you're an idiot if you don't do it. So that'll force you to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And hey, you're not always going to be perfect when that time comes. But you'll have done it.
Yeah. You'll have something out there. You'll have done something, and that's really important. And you talked about the marker board, Ed, and you must be my brother from another mother, because I'm into marker boards too, man. I'm a big believer in that. I'm looking at one right now, and I just put everything up there for the. Sometimes I do it for the day, what's going on, for that day. And then it feels good when I erase what I've done. It's just kind of, I don't know, it feels good. Like I accomplished it. And so I'll erase this, line. I might have 20 lines of stuff I have to do. And then as I complete each task, I'll erase it. So when I get down to like 1 or 2 tasks, I'm like, yeah, maybe it's been a good day.
Yeah, I totally the other day added something to my whiteboard to-do list just so I could cross it off.
It's awesome.
I was like, and I watched it. No one knew I did it. No one saw my whiteboard. I work in a home basement office, and I literally wrote it up and put a check mark beside it. And I thought, why did I do this? What?
Well, now you just told 20,000 listeners. No, there's probably one list. Probably my mom sitting in her basement listening to this. It's probably the only person. So you don't have anything to worry about. No, just kidding. Well, getting back to the questions is, when did you realize you wanted to be an entrepreneur? Have you always had that drive to be one? And
no, I've always been creative. And I've always enjoyed creating and making things, but I'd say, so I still remember having this conversation with some college buddies. So I lived on campus, in college. I had 2 roommates, and this is one of those cheesy moments where we're all like lying on our backs in our beds and we're staring at the ceiling, just talking about what could be. But we got on this topic.
Was that after you drank a lot of cheap beer?
No, no,
Okay. All right. No,
no. Since we were on
I was thinking
campus,
about myself. I'm sorry.
no, we were on campus, and no alcohol allowed on campus,
Mm.
and we weren't of age because it's 21. So up here, I think it's 19, and you can drink. Is that
Up in
right?
Canada?
19? Yeah, I think it's 19. Maybe it's 18. It's got to be 19.
Man, you
I don't
should
know. It
have
doesn't
said
matter
that.
now.
You're gonna have a bunch of Americans, underage Americans, running through the border, and it's all gonna be your fault.
Yeah, exactly. So no, we were completely sober, but it was just one of those moments. And I remember we started trying to come up with ideas that were going to make us millionaires, and one of those ideas resulted in probably one of the most fun times I've ever had in my life. We started creating these really cheesy, half scripted, half improv like movies around campus, and like we'd make a horror movie and then a comedy and then a musical. They were so stupid. We didn't make a dime. We didn't even try and make a dime, but it resulted from just like dreaming about what we could create. And it was probably around that time that I was like, you know what? At some point, I want to be able to do this. I want to be staying up late because I'm working on something that I want to do, not something I have to do. I want to be able to create something, say that's mine, not someone else's, that I just helped them put together. And I mean, it took me 10 years from that time to actually make the jump. But that's my earliest memory of thinking I could do this whole business entrepreneurship thing.
Yeah, well, that's cool, and it has to start somewhere. It's kind of like that was the seed that was planted, so to speak, I guess.
Yeah. The first entrepreneurship thing I did, so I told you it took 9 years, but that's not true. So when I wanted to get married, I sold T-shirts so that I could afford a wedding
Awesome.
ring. And
You pay for
so I had all these.
selling T-shirts. You pay for a whole wedding.
No, not even close.
Oh,
I barely broke even, but it was the thought that counts.
Yeah, heck yeah, man. If you
Yeah.
love T-shirts, I mean, I don't know how much weddings cost in Canada, but
The same, $30,000. We didn't spend that on our wedding, but that's something like it's probably more than that now.
I'm sure you'd spend 30 million on your wife because she's worth it, right?
I would. I don't have it, but I would if I had it.
If I had it, I hope she's listening. If he had it, he would, and
Yeah.
so that's awesome. Well, what kind of messages did you receive growing up about money and finances and all that good stuff, or were you like many of us who just were never told anything and we fumbled around in the dark with our money?
So I don't know. My dad's an accountant, so I think that helped, but I don't remember much in the way of like formal conversations about money. But the one thing that really stuck with me, my first job was at McDonald's, and I was making $6.40 an hour. And my parents took half of every paycheck and put it into savings for school. And that was probably the extent of our conversations about finances, or that's the only thing I listened to because it affected me. But it did teach me that you need to sacrifice for what you want and you need to be patient. I mean, I was saving for school well before I even cared about going to school, like when would I have started working? 9th grade or something like that. And so it's 4 years. I'm like, where's this money going? I don't get to use this money for 4 years. Not to mention,
Well, that's hard.
what a reality. You spend all this money. I never felt like I was getting anything for all the money I spent on school. Like you save up for a car. You get to drive a car.
Yeah, you got something tangible. You can look.
Yeah, you get to like hold it and touch it. It's like, all right, in school, really? I've done this my whole life. What feels different?
Right. Yeah, but education, like, well, what am I getting from this, man? This is crazy.
Yeah.
At least in a car, you get. I mean, I remember like on Friday nights, I'm washing or Friday evenings washing that thing, getting ready to go out on a date or something, or
Nice.
or just driving by myself because I get rejected. Whatever. But, I had my old crappy car that was all armor-alled and shined up, but made it look nice. So that's interesting.
Nice.
Your dad was an accountant, and he didn't even have that talk with you.
Well, he may have. I may have just not listened.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what's kind of ironic about it, because you mentioned how so many people aren't actually taught anything about money, and I wonder. I don't have anything to back this up, but I wonder if it's just most people don't care to listen to the advice that they're given about money, and that's a scary thing for me as a dad. It's like, Well, my dad's an accountant. He probably did. Did I just not care?
Yeah. Yeah, you had your mind on other stuff.
Yeah, or maybe I did listen. I just didn't recall the lessons he was teaching me. And I mean, I consider myself to be okay with money.
Right.
I don't know.
Well, I
Maybe
guess,
I'm not.
when you're young, you're kind of focused on buying a bunch of crap, and you really don't.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, as they're talking to you about it, and maybe my dad too. I had that discussion, and I don't remember, and I tuned him out, a lot of times on stuff, and now I wish I would have paid attention because he was so right
Yeah.
about a lot of things. But I think this is
You-
part of being a teenager, and a kid. It's
It
just
is.
not important. It's like, it's just money, man.
Yeah.
Just do what I can to get some so I can go get some baseball cards or something.
Yeah. So I'll also share this because I think this is kind of cool. One of the most significant memories I have from my corporate job was probably my first year. I want to say my first year in a corporate role. And I remember the director of our region literally taught a bunch of classes on money to a bunch of us employees. He just opened it up and said, "Hey, over lunch, if you want to come in, I'm just going to teach you about money." And that was incredible. I couldn't tell you what he taught us specifically, but I remember how it made me feel to think my boss is sacrificing, and he wasn't my direct report. He was my boss's boss. My boss's boss is taking time out of his lunch hour to teach his employees how to manage their finances. That's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I haven't heard of that, but that's great that he took that time to
Yeah.
do that. So, yeah, I'm sure that was pretty memorable because none of my bosses ever did that. I don't know they
No,
ever cared, but
I stayed at that company for 8 years.
huh. Interesting. Wow. Well, have you ever had a time, Jamie, looking back when you were just stressed out as an entrepreneur, when you were like, man, I don't know if I can continue to do this? And if you had that experience, how did you cope with it mentally? Like, how did you just drive through it?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. I think for starters, I think mental toughness is something that you need to develop and be intentional about. And it even goes back to what I mentioned earlier, the talk about money. I think you've got to recognize that good things require sacrifice. And when you do that over long periods of time, sacrifice things and delayed gratification, things like that, I think that builds up mental toughness. But to be honest, to talk about a specific example, right now, every day, it's something that I've experienced more as an entrepreneur. And in my career, I was in sales, so it's not a huge stretch. I mean, in sales, I was paid based on commission, but a lot of it was predictable. And becoming an entrepreneur, one of the biggest challenges before you're rolling like the celebrities you see on TV, you don't always get a consistent paycheck, or at least you don't start off with a consistent paycheck. And to be honest, I don't know if I'm making $1 tomorrow or $30,000 tomorrow, and both could happen. And both have an impact on my family. And so the real struggle is the question, when I don't bring in that dollar that one day, what do they think about me? In times when the money doesn't show up right away, are they proud of me? Are they trusting me? How are they handling it? And so I think that mental game is the biggest stress that I face, and I face it on a very regular basis. But the way I cope, and I guess to give you some context, so I'm a Christian, so one of the ways that I cope is I read the Bible, I pray, and I recognize and rely on God as a provider. And our family's got an incredible support system through our church, and so I'm able to meet with other men and be open about struggles that I'm facing, discuss things like parenting and marriage and all that, because one of the things that I realized becoming an entrepreneur is your work and life are one all of a sudden. And so it wasn't so much that you go to work and you can kind of try and separate the two. You never really can, but as an entrepreneur, you really can't separate the two. And so, I mean, I guess the lessons you can take out of that, I've got a support group, and that's probably the biggest thing. Like every Thursday, I sit down with a bunch of other guys and we just talk about what's going on. And if I didn't have that, I don't know what I'd do.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I think people who have a limited network of support can find that around them. It doesn't necessarily have to be, people that they know at the moment, but to be able to reach out, even online, there are a lot of groups out there that you can join and just be a member of. And so you may not get to see them face to face, but just that interaction online sometimes can be enough support to help get you through. And you talked about being in sales and not knowing if you're going to make $1 or 10,000 or 30,000 one day. That could really wear on you because, like you said, you tend to start to internalize it. What are people thinking? Am I a failure? And both sides of the coin are difficult. It's like, okay, well, what do I think about myself? Because I didn't make any sales today. Maybe I am terrible at this, and maybe I should give up and go back to a job where I can have a consistent paycheck. May not be a lot, but at least I know what I'm getting every week or every 2 weeks whenever I get paid. And then the other piece of that is, well, what's my family going to think, or, my friends, or, whatever it might be. So that can be a tough game that you constantly have to have, ongoing, day in, day out, every week, every month, every year that you're in sales. And that's a tough road to haul. And not a lot of people are willing and able to kind of put themselves in that position because it is so stressful. And it's just more comforting to have that stability. It's like, I don't like making minimum wage, but at least I know I'm going to get the same amount every week, and I can budget for that. And maybe I have to have a day or two where I eat ramen noodles and whatnot, but at least I can get by versus, what if I go out and don't make any sales and I bomb, and, what will I think about myself? What will other people think? And that just eats away at people.
Yeah. Yeah. The rewards have to be worth the sacrifice. And yeah, entrepreneurship is not something that should be taken lightly. And I didn't take it lightly. I remember talking to my wife, and we were actually out for dinner. I want to say the night before our second child was born. And I remember we're just talking about not only like the prospect of, hey, what if this thing works? I hadn't quit my job at that time. It's like, hey, what if I do quit? And what if I build a business? What does that mean for us? What does that mean for the opportunities we have to give to others? What does that mean for our kids and all this stuff? But we also talked, hey, in order to do this, are we willing to go, like, so when we first got married, we got married on credit cards. And so we racked up $20,000 in credit card debt, just so that we could get married. And we dug through that and ended up coming out on top. And I had built a very successful career, and we were doing very well financially when I quit. So I remember having the conversation and saying, hey, are these things that we talked about that we want, are they worth us going another $20,000 in credit card debt? Because what if I told you that we're going to go $20,000 in credit card debt, but right after that, I'm going to make $300,000? Can you deal with the fear of not making a mortgage payment? Can you deal with watching the interest? Can you deal with the uncertainty? Sure, if you knew 100% without a shadow of a doubt that the 300 grand's around the corner, but you have to be willing to be okay with that circumstance, and that's something that I don't want to say I struggle with, but I think about on a regular basis. Am I okay telling one of my friends that I'm going to go into debt right now, or that I need to make a sale? Because if you're not willing to have that humility and willing to be vulnerable, you're going to really struggle to find those connections that are available to you. And you mentioned, I mean, there's masterminds, there's groups, but that's why they exist. Because if you just internalize all that, it's very easy to feel like you're the only one that's going through it. And you're not. That doesn't mean that you have to go into credit card debt. I'm not advocating that, obviously. But that is the uncertainty. There's that feeling of, okay, what if this doesn't work? And that is something you have to weigh against, but what if it does work? And if the reward is worth it, you're going to power through those tough times.
Right. And the important thing of that is the conversation that you have with people around you, and to process that. Too many people will keep that as an internal dialogue and either not do it or jump in, and then other people around them do not know what's going on. And then I think that that adds to the stress. It adds to the anxiety, and it adds to the overall just kind of mental game and fatigue that you'll get over time.
Yeah.
So that's a powerful tip right there, is to communicate with those around you in your inner circle and let them know. And it helps you to be able to process it. It lets them know what's going on, and it also helps you to process it at a different level. Because many times, we can think something as a thought, but when you actually tell someone, it's the whole process of speaking and hearing yourself, and it allows you to take it, and you will start to take that information and really figure it out, just by talking to someone. It may not be anything that they tell you. It may not be any advice they give you, but it's that process that helps you figure this whole thing out, whether it's right or wrong or whatever it might be. So that's powerful. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, and it's never as bad as you think it's going to be. I mean, how many times have you been vulnerable with somebody and they've turned and mocked you for it? Sure, I don't want to dismiss the fact that that's probably happened to some people and it hurts, but most of the time people want to help you. Like, and it's the number of times that I've been afraid to admit something. And then when I've actually admitted it, the person's helped me overcome the struggle that I'm going through. And I'm like, man, why didn't I just do this 2 months ago?
I know the feeling.
It's like, I just need one more client. And it's like, oh, well, why don't you call my friend? You had a friend this whole time? Yeah, I just didn't know what you were going through.
Yeah. You never know. You never, ever know. And so it's always great to process and share it. And I'm sure that you've had some great moments as an entrepreneur along your journey. What would you say was one of the most fulfilling moments?
Yeah, so this is easy because and it's a little bit of I guess not really answering your question, but this happens on a regular basis, and it's one of the reasons why I love what I do. So as we mentioned, I host a podcast called the Your Best Manager Show, and so the biggest high that I get is when I receive a notification in my inbox that a new guest has been booked for my show. And I specifically remember I did a huge fist bump and probably jumped a little bit. So I listened to Entrepreneur on Fire with John Lee Dumas, as so many people do. Yeah. And he interviewed Howard Behar, the former president of Starbucks, I want to say back in like October of 2016. And so I sent Howard an email and just said, "Hey, I really loved what you said on your interview with John Lee Dumas. I'm thinking about starting a podcast. I'll let you know if I do that." And when I decided to launch the podcast, he was one of the first people I reached out to, and I asked, "Hey, would you consider coming on the show?" And I still remember him emailing me back saying yes, and then immediately I saw a little calendar invite pop up, and I was like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And I mean, that happens every day. And it's not just about the celebrities. I mean, I had someone confirm today. I don't even know who he is. I mean, I shouldn't say that. But like personally, there's a lot of people that it wasn't until I started doing this show that I actually started researching some incredible people in the leadership space and came across this guy. And I didn't know him, but I liked what he said on his website. I was like, I need to interview this person. And he said yes today. I felt awesome. Yeah. And that's when I found the most fulfillment, because it for me, it's a reminder that I'm not the only one who thinks this leadership development thing's important. There are people that have accomplished more, that have gone before me, the giants, so to speak, of the leadership world, that feel that this topic that I talk about on my show is important. And that's really fulfilling for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it really validates what you're doing, and it makes you feel like, wow, because I think too often as podcasters, John Lee Dumas says it a lot, you get that imposter syndrome. It's like, oh, well, who am I to interview these people, or, whatever it might be. And then, when they're on there, you're like, oh, well, this is cool. And now I got to step up my game and you take risk, and ask people who you'll be surprised at who will say yes to something. And I think a lot of people just have that they they'll never talk to me. I'm nobody.
Yeah, I felt that way, and I think we were talking about this before we started the interview. But I took a list of 100 people that I thought would say no to me, and I created videos and sent them to them. And I still remember when I was sending them out, I even put a delay send because I wasn't confident sending those emails out. And I remember my hands shaking. And I would initially, while I was sending them one by one, I'd turn off my inbox because I didn't want to see the rejection letters come back while I was sending out these invites. And my whole goal was, out of 100 invites, I want 3 people to say yes. And so far, I think I've got 15 to say yes. And maybe my expectations were too low, but it's amazing. All I did is ask people to come share something that I consider important, that I thought they would consider important. And yeah, they've said yes.
Yeah, you never know. You just have to put yourself out there, because if you didn't, I mean, that's 15 less guests than you would have if you hadn't taken that risk. And
it was that imposter syndrome that was holding me back and made me scared, because I thought, well, they wouldn't want to talk to me. I don't have the years of experience. It was all those voices in my head. They were wrong.
Right. I think almost all of us at some point struggle with that. And it's an ongoing thing that, maybe one day I feel great, I feel confident, and next day I don't for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And you just got to pick yourself up and say, no, man. And don't lead with emotion. Just lead with, this is what I'm doing. I'm going to contact these 50 people, and not think about the emotion or any deeper thought. Just, this is what my task is. And don't process it. Just do it, put it out there, and you will probably be surprised.
Yeah, manage your own performance as you should an employee. I mean, the best way to give feedback to an employee is to give feedback on the task and on the result, not on the person. And we sometimes need to take that advice for ourselves and, think about the task, think about the result, separate the person, separate your personal feelings from the task that you need to accomplish. I'm running a business. I need to reach out to prospective clients. That's my job. That's what I do. I need to make sure, as a salesperson, let's say, and every entrepreneur is a salesperson, my number one job is people need to know I exist. So I need to tell them. It's not a reflection of me if they don't like my business. It's not a reflection of me if they don't like my service. It's a reflection of my service doesn't fit them. And when you separate those things, all of a sudden your confidence grows, because it's not about you. It's about your prospect, and trying to figure out, hey, is my business going to add value to them?
Yeah, I could not agree more, Jamie. Well, we've come to the end of the show, and you've been a fantastic guest. We had a good time. And now I want to give you a chance and an opportunity to tell the listeners where they can find you and connect with you on social media or on your website and all that good stuff.
Well, Tim, first of all, thanks. I have not laughed so much, and I just laughed again in a long time. I've had a ton of fun chatting with you. You're a fantastic coach, or a host. Why did I say coach?
Hey, I'm a coach. I'm a middle skills coach. Yeah,
you are. Yeah. Did you plant that earlier when we were talking?
I did. It's a subliminal thing. We're gonna have a whole nother show on that. And actually, I hypnotized you. You will not remember this when this show's over. So
love it. Well, anyway, I really appreciate coming on. Everything I do is at yourbestmanager.com. You can find the podcast through yourbestmanager.com. You can find, I've got a free management course called Fully Engaged in 10 Days. It's all about employee engagement. I run webinars from time to time and leadership challenges from time to time. So a ton of free resources there. I mean, it's relevant for entrepreneurs, because a lot of entrepreneurs build their businesses as solopreneurs. And one of the most exciting times in an entrepreneur's life is when you get to hire your first employee. But that can also be pretty scary, especially if you haven't managed people before. So hopefully if that's where you're at right now, hopefully you can find some resources. And if you need anything, reach out to me. My email address is pretty public. It's jamie@yourbestmanager.com. So feel free to drop me a line. But yeah, Tim, thanks. This has been so much fun, man.
Oh, it's been a blast. And I encourage all the listeners out there to find Jamie online, connect with him, because you can see he's a fun guy and he knows what he's talking about. And so I look forward to staying in touch, Jamie. And next time I come up to Canada, we're going to have to get together for some coffee. Maybe we'll have a coffee drinking contest or something.
Yeah, there's some good local roasters here. So
awesome.
Calgary's a little far from, where'd you say, South Carolina, North Carolina?
South Carolina. No, I can make it in a couple of hours. I could be there,
Okay. The flights to and from between Canada and the U.S. are stupid. compared to
Yeah.
flying domestically within the U.S.
Uh-huh.
It appalls me.
Yeah.
It costs me, if I want to fly from Calgary to Toronto, it costs me like a minimum of minimum I would be able to find at a good time solo would be $600. But
What?
there are times where it's over $1,000 to fly just 4 hours from Calgary to Toronto.
Wow. Man, that is expensive.
Ridiculous.
Well, we're going to
Yeah,
wait
half
till
of that's
those-
taxes.
Wow.
Anyway.
That's for a whole nother show, huh? Taxes. Death and taxes, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Jamie, you've been a blast, and I will definitely be in touch, and take care.
Want more entrepreneurial tips? Go to timlaskas.com.